These two children were twins, but their mother only showered affection on the older sister. The younger sister was constantly treated with indifference. Even the smallest things, like their school shoes, revealed the mother's blatant favoritism. This unfair treatment shaped their personalities in starkly contrasting ways. One day, the school held an arts festival. The older sister was cast as a servant, required to wear a hanbok. Seeing her younger sister dressed up as a princess, a malicious look crossed her face. She approached her sister and, using the pretense of rehearsing lines, pulled away the boy who was talking to her. In doing so, she tripped over her own skirt and fell, immediately blaming her sister. The younger sister denied tripping her, but the older sister insisted, even asking the boy for confirmation. He stated that she had simply tripped on her own. Undeterred, the older sister accused them of ganging up on her. The younger sister walked away, only to have the older sister step on her dress. The boy helped her up and defended her. Seeing her sister had someone backing her up, the older sister turned to leave. Just then, the younger sister noticed a large rip in her sister's hanbok. The older sister, noticing the tear as well, rushed back and demanded her sister give her the dress, even trying to pull it off her. The younger sister resisted, and a tug-of-war ensued until a teacher intervened. They stopped fighting but glared at each other with simmering resentment. Meanwhile, their parents anxiously awaited the performance. The curtain rose, revealing the older sister mopping the floor. The audience erupted in laughter. The younger sister, playing the lead role, entered the stage and told her sister, the servant, to watch and like her performance. Furious, the older sister threw down the rag and declared that she was the main character. This sudden change in dialogue left the younger sister speechless. The older sister then looked towards her parents and fainted. Her parents were instantly alarmed, and the teacher rushed to her side. The next day, the younger sister overheard classmates discussing how her sister had faked the faint. She defended her sister, saying she had been sick that morning. The younger sister's name was Yoon Bile. As soon as Yoon Bile got home from school, her mother pulled her older sister, Jeum Bile, aside and scolded Yoon Bile for stepping on her sister's dress. Jeum Bile stood beside her mother, smug. Yoon Bile denied it, but her mother continued to defend Jeum Bile. Later, the father confronted the mother about her favoritism towards Jeum Bile. The mother retorted that while they were twins, Yoon Bile was born healthy, while Jeum Bile was barely a pound. Just thinking about it made her heart ache for her. Time passed, and the only constants were the two pairs of shoes by the door. Yoon Bile became a low-level employee at a company, while her mother continued to pamper Jeum Bile and even found her a wealthy future mother-in-law. Jeum Bile became a young executive, while Yoon Bile was laid off due to the economic downturn. One day, as she entered a restroom, a man suddenly rushed in behind her. Another man entered and, searching for someone, opened each stall door. He found an occupied stall and knocked gently. The person inside knocked back. He waited. When the person inside came out, he grabbed them in a tight embrace. Realizing it was his daughter, he pushed her against the wall and then released her. She turned and attacked him. As he tried to explain, she assumed he was a pervert and demanded to know what he was doing in the women's restroom. He pointed out that it was the men's room. Mortified, she blushed crimson. He apologized and left. As she stood there, questioning her existence, another man entered and was startled to find a woman there. Embarrassed, she covered her face with her bag and slipped out, glancing back at the sign to make sure she hadn't been hallucinating. On her way home, Yoon Bile received a call for a job interview, bringing her immense joy after 2 days of unemployment. Just then, she saw a student being carried away. She asked what was happening, only to realize it was the man she'd encountered in the restroom. Embarrassed, she turned away. Suddenly, she heard the student yell that he was being kidnapped. Recalling the man's grip on her earlier, she screamed, "Police!" When he didn't pursue her. She cautiously made her way home, only to run into him again. Yoon Bile prepared to scream, but the man insisted he wasn't a kidnapper. Just then, a group of young men ran up. It turned out the man was a taekwondo instructor. Yoon Bile tried to slip away, but he stopped her, asking why she was so quick to interfere. Yoon Bile's retort left him speechless. Back home, as Yoon Bile was cleaning, her mother told her to clean her sister's room as well. "Doesn't she have hands?" Yoon Bile retorted. Her mother replied, Jeonbyeol is busy preparing for her wedding. Can't you do this small thing for your sister? Reluctantly, Jeonbyeol went to her sister's room. Clothes were strewn everywhere on the bed, the floor, every surface. Jeonbyeol thought she should take pictures and send them to her sister's company and in-laws to show them how they'd been deceived. As she began tidying, she heard Jeonbyeol's voice. Her fiancé had returned from abroad with gifts. Infuriated, Jeonbyeol stormed out and told Jeonbyeol to clean her own room. Jeonbyeol tossed her a gift and sneered, "What good are you?" The next day, Jeonbyeol received a call from her future father-in-law. He wanted Jeonbyeol to write his autobiography. Jeonbyeol claimed Jeonbyeol was too busy and refused. Upon learning this, Jeonbyeol confronted her sister, and a major fight erupted. When their mother entered, Jeonbyeol hid behind her, whining, "My sister is so stingy." Jeonbyeol lunged at her, but their mother intervened. Jeonbyeol hit Jeonbyeol with a pillow. Jeonbyeol retaliated. The brawl continued until their father intervened. Their mother then urged Jeonbyeol to find another job. Jeonbyeol mocked her. Though reluctant to give up the opportunity, Jeonbyeol went to another job interview. The interviewer entered, holding a dog. Jeonbyeol, terrified of furry animals, froze. The interviewer put the dog down, and Jeonbyeol jumped onto a chair in fear. The interviewer was speechless. Later, at a pharmacy buying bandages, Jeonbyeol ran into the kidnapped student. He recognized her and invited her to his restaurant for a meal to thank her for saving him. He gave her a plate of fried dumplings. Jeonbyeol called over the man who had kidnapped him and, tripping him, declared, "This is your punishment for taking advantage of my kindness yesterday." Jeonbyeol listened as they talked. The student was the man's taekwondo student, and he was simply trying to get him to return to a competition. After the meal, the man invited Jeonbyeol for coffee and then offered to share his bus ride. When they reached the bus stop, Jeonbyeol's coffee was still full, so he told her to board first. On the bus, they exchanged glances. Suddenly, the coffee spilled, splashing another passenger. "How can you bring drinks on the bus?" he complained, demanding she clean it up. Jeonbyeol offered her scarf, but the man took off his shirt and wiped the passenger's pants. Thankfully, the coffee wasn't hot. Very quickly, the two of them were seated. The man noticed Jeonbyeol's injured leg. She explained that she had clumsily fallen. She then pulled out a band-aid but fumbled with it. The man gently took it from her and applied it to her wound. A slight awkwardness hung between them. Jeonbyeol offered to take his shirt to launder it, but he insisted it was fine. Still feeling apologetic, she offered to treat him to a meal, which he readily accepted. They made plans to have dinner together the following evening. After their meal, they stepped outside. The man offered to walk Jeonbyeol home, but she mentioned her father was waiting for her at the gate. It was then that they realized they hadn't even exchanged names. The man introduced himself as Han-ju, and Jeonbyeol told him her name as well. They then parted ways. Suddenly, Jeonbyeol stopped dead in her tracks. A cute dog had appeared in front of her, startling her into a scream. She turned and ran, but the dog chased after her. Han-ju, unsure of what had happened, saw Jeonbyeol jump into his arms. Momentarily stunned, he reacted when she urged him to run. He scooped her up without a second thought and ran. Reaching a nearby cabinet, he placed Jeonbyeol on top of it and then picked up the dog. Jeonbyeol, still trembling with fear, watched. Han-ju realized the dog was probably lost. They considered taking it to the police station, but the dog barked at Jeonbyeol, so she told Han-ju to go ahead. Han-ju hadn't gotten far when the dog's owner appeared. He returned the dog to the woman, but she mistakenly accused him of stealing it. Jeonbyeol stepped in to defend Han-ju, even scolding the woman. The woman, however, ignored them and walked away. Jeonbyeol wanted to pursue her and continue arguing, but Han-ju held her back. The following day, they went to the movies. Coincidentally, Jeonbyeol's sister and her fiancé were also there. Han-ju went to the restroom alone and ran into Jeonbyeol's fiancé, Min-ho. Although they recognized each other, they shared a bitter rivalry. Years ago, both men had been taekwondo athletes. During a competition, Min-ho's wealthy father had bribed the judges to ensure his son's victory. Later, they encountered each other in the hallway. Both young and hot-headed, Han-ju, disgusted by Min-ho's arrogance, had kicked him in the nose. Hanju's father had taken him to apologize, but Minho's father refused to be appeased. Hanju's father had even knelt and offered to forfeit a property dispute. Enraged, Hanju had snatched the written agreement his father had offered and torn it to shreds, forfeiting his own eligibility to compete forever. Since then, not only had a bitter rivalry existed between the families, but also a feud over real estate. The next day, Jeonbyeol's mother was taken by her future in-laws to a luxurious store to choose wedding gifts. Looking at a pair of expensive watches presented by the salesperson, the aunt Jeonbyeol's mother inquired about the price. "Just have a look," the future mother-in-law said, then immediately instructed the salesperson to bring out the most expensive items, leaving the aunt stunned. Suddenly, the aunt's phone rang. She rushed outside to answer it, only to receive devastating news. Her investment, including the money set aside for her daughter's dowry, had been lost in a scam. She rushed back inside, accidentally bumping into another woman. She scooped up a bag from the floor and hurried away. When she reached her destination, several other women were anxiously waiting. It was clear they were all victims of the same scam, and the perpetrator was nowhere to be found. Devastated but afraid to tell her family, the aunt returned home and secretly called acquaintances, only to be overheard by Jeonbyeol. Unable to bring herself to confess, the aunt remained silent, and Jeonbyeol gave up questioning her. Later, thinking Jeonbyeol might have some savings, the aunt confided in her about the disastrous loss. Just then, Jeonbyeol arrived home, excitedly showing her mother the wedding photos and asking for some dowry money. Jeonbyeol was speechless. Her mother quickly changed the subject. Jeonbyeol asked her sister if she had any money to help cover the wedding expenses. Jeonbyeol told Jeonbyeol not to worry about her wedding, and the two sisters, who already had a strained relationship, erupted into an argument. The next day, Jeonbyeol went to the bank only to be informed that she had insufficient funds. She went to her future mother-in-law, who told her that the wedding venue was already booked. "You know the costs are split, right? Just send the deposit to the restaurant. Your mother is probably struggling, so just transfer it yourself. 10 million won will do. The deadline is tomorrow." Jeonbyeol stood frozen, barely registering her future mother-in-law's words. Meanwhile, Jeonbyeol was on the phone in the office her future father-in-law had provided for her. Jeonbyeol stormed in, immediately launching into a furious argument with her sister. Words escalated to a physical fight. Noticing someone outside, Jeonbyeol quickly grabbed Jeonbyeol, who pushed her away. Jeonbyeol blurted out, "Your in-laws are here," instantly. Both sisters plastered on cheerful expressions. As their future in-laws entered, they put on a show of joyful camaraderie. "What are they so happy about?" the chairman future father-in-law asked. Jeonbyeol replied, "Jeonbyeol found a boyfriend." Jeonbyeol, gritting her teeth, played along. On her way home, Jeonbyeol saw an elderly woman buying fruit. The woman accidentally dropped some money. Jeonbyeol rushed to help her pick it up. A gust of wind blew a bill into a sewer grate. Jeonbyeol lunged for it, narrowly avoiding a pile of, excrement. Mortified, she apologized to a nearby driver. The elderly woman hurried over, and Jeonbyeol returned the remaining money, but the woman seemed to take an immediate interest in her. "How old are you, Jeonbyeol?" she asked. "Just turned 30, Jeonbyeol replied softly. "Do you have a boyfriend?" the woman inquired. Jeonbyeol shyly answered, "No." Excusing herself, Jeonbyeol said she had to go. Unbeknownst to her, the elderly woman was Hanju's grandmother. Jeonbyeol waited at the movie theater for Hanju, but he didn't show up. Her mother called. Jeonbyeol was sick and needed medicine. Just as Jeonbyeol was about to leave, Hanju called, saying, "I'll be right there." But Jeonbyeol had to go home, so they rescheduled for the next day. Back home, Jeonbyeol found Jeonbyeol in bed. Because Jeonbyeol wouldn't lend her money, Jeonbyeol threw a pillow at her. The next morning, Jeonbyeol was violently ill in the bathroom. As she tried to stand, she fainted. Jeonbyeol found her unconscious on the floor and called an ambulance. As she tried to follow the ambulance to the hospital, her mother pushed her away and glared at her. Fortunately, Jeonbyeol was all right. After a checkup, Jeonbyeol returned home, continuing to blame Jeonbyeol. Because Jeonbyeol was planning to study art abroad, and their mother had lost the dowry money, Jeonbyeol pressured Jeonbyeol to give her the money. Yoon Bile didn't have the funds, which had contributed to Jeom Bile's stress and subsequent illness. Yoon Bile brought Jeom Bile some porridge, which Jeom Bile promptly kicked over. Overhearing Yoon Bile talking about going abroad, Jeom Bile stormed off to her room. Jeom Bile saw Yoon Bile's artwork, ripped it off the wall, and tore it to shreds. Returning to her room, Yoon Bile found her destroyed artwork. Instead of getting angry, she sat down and began picking up the pieces. Jeom Bile stood over her, berating her relentlessly. Their mother arrived home, heard the crying, and rushed into Jeom Bile's room to find her sobbing in bed. She immediately started blaming Yoon Bile, accusing her of not even making porridge for her sister. Feeling utterly wronged and unjustly accused, Yoon Bile tried to explain. Jeom Bile then admitted to tearing Yoon Bile's poster. Learning it was about a drawing, their mother began criticizing Yoon Bile and demanding the dowry money. Finally reaching her breaking point, Yoon Bile couldn't hold back anymore. Her mother threw herself onto the bed, wailing dramatically. Witnessing her mother's behavior, Yoon Bile felt a deep ache in her heart. She sat in a corner, weeping in anguish. Just then, her phone rang. It was Han-ju, asking her out. But she wasn't in the mood. So, Han-ju told her he had a gift for her and asked her to come outside. Since Yoon Bile had mentioned wanting to go abroad, Han-ju had bought her a suitcase. Seeing the suitcase, her heart sank because she had given all her savings to her mother. In the end, she chose to give up on her dream. She asked Han-ju to take her somewhere, anywhere. He took her to the riverbank to clear her head. Although she couldn't study abroad, Han-ju considered it a blessing in disguise. Even though Yoon Bile wanted him to be a good guy, he wanted to be a bad boy. Han-ju mustered up the courage to confess his feelings to Yoon Bile. It seemed one door closed and another opened. Yoon Bile had given up her dream, but she gained love. She leaned on Han-ju's strong shoulder, and her earlier troubles seemed to melt away. Under the romantic setting of this confession, they shared a passionate kiss. Yoon Bile carried the suitcase home. Her mother and sister saw her and came in. Despite their argument earlier that day, they were still family, and her mother was worried about her. Her sister also agreed to return the money after her wedding. "If I was too much, please forgive me. Don't be mad anymore," she pleaded. Hearing their apologies, Yoon Bile felt relieved. After all, they were family. She then opened the suitcase Han-ju had given her. Inside, he had thoughtfully packed other necessities for her. Seeing their photo together, a sweet smile spread across her face. The next day, they went out on a date. Knowing she was afraid of dogs, Han-ju specifically brought one along to help her overcome her fear. She was still scared and instinctively kept her distance. But soon, they were embracing and kissing passionately. Meanwhile, Jeom Bile was finishing preparations for her wedding. But when she saw something under the table, she suddenly screamed. The dowry she had prepared had been mistakenly switched. Her mother had taken the fake dowry to the groom's family, while the real one was still at home. Upon learning that the fake items had already been delivered, Jeom Bile fainted onto the bed. Her mother rushed over and slapped her twice. When she didn't react, she splashed water on her face. At the groom's house, his mother was examining the gifts from the bride's family, but she hadn't yet realized they were all fakes. Jeom Bile sat on the bed, looking disheveled. If her in-laws discovered the truth, she would be mortified. Her mother could only pray that the deception wouldn't be revealed, planning to secretly switch the dowries after the wedding. The wedding day arrived quickly. The two embarked on a new chapter of their lives. But unexpectedly, Jeom Bile's wealthy husband turned out to be the sworn enemy of Yoon Bile's boyfriend. Upon learning this, the older sister went to her younger sister's office and told her that the man she was dating was the violent athlete who had broken her husband's nose years ago. It was because of that incident that her husband couldn't go to college and ended up becoming a taekwondo instructor. Yoon Bile was shocked but skeptical. How could she know the whole story from just one side? Even if it were true, there had to be a reason. Han-ju wasn't the type to resort to violence without cause. Yoon Bile believed there was more to the story and decided to ask Han-ju directly. Meanwhile, their mother went straight to Han-ju and told him to break up with Yoon Bile. Upon hearing this, he ran out. When Yoon Bile called, he didn't answer. By then, Yoon Bile had arrived at his taekwondo studio. Although she couldn't find Han-ju, she learned the answer she sought from one of his students. Years ago, it was her brother-in-law who had bribed the judges to win the competition. This infuriated Hanju, leading him to break his nose. Returning home, Yoon Bio was met with her mother and sister's taunts, which enraged her, and she stormed out. She had to find Hanju and get his side of the story. She went to his studio again, only to find it closed. She wandered through the park and happened to see Hanju sitting there. "Let's get married," she blurted out. However, Hanju replied, "Let's break up." Yoon Bio was incredulous. "I can avoid my sister," she pleaded. "We can just live our own lives." But Hanju's mind was made up. Yoon Bio didn't give up and chased after him, but he was gone. He was hiding around the corner, silently crying. The next day, the two sisters ran into each other in the restroom. To ensure Yoon Bio broke up with Hanju, Jeom Bio had planned to fund her studies abroad. But her priorities had shifted. They started arguing again, the fight escalating until it turned physical. Wanting to ignore her sister, Yoon Bio tried to leave, but Jeom Bio hit her on the back of the head with a plate. Yoon Bio wrestled it away from her and unleashed years of pent-up frustration. She then locked the restroom door, trapping a terrified Jeom Bio inside a stall. Jeom Bio huddled inside, trembling, while Yoon Bio stood guard outside. Colleagues knocked on the door, and Yoon Bio warned, "She's barely holding it together. If you want peace, don't mess with me." Then she turned and left, running straight into Hanju. Seeing her, he quickly entered the elevator. She rushed to the closing doors, slipped inside, and confronted him. "Did my brother-in-law threaten you? Is that why you want to break up with me?" But Hanju wouldn't answer, looking as if someone had him in a bind. He pulled his hand away from hers and walked out of the elevator. Yoon Bio went to the park alone. Seeing a couple walking on the gravel path, she reminisced about the happy times she'd shared with Hanju. Then she noticed an elderly woman with Alzheimer's. The woman took a cotton candy and turned to leave, but the vendor yelled at her, startling her so badly she fell to the ground. Yoon Bio rushed to help her up and realized it was the same woman she'd encountered before. But the woman didn't recognize her. Yoon Bio asked a patrolling police officer to take her home. As she was leaving, the woman, struggling to remember something, insisted Yoon Bio join her for a meal before going. Just then, Hanju returned, and the woman Yoon Bio had brought home was his grandmother. His grandmother's memory returned, and she declared Yoon Bio was the granddaughter-in-law she had chosen. When Hanju tried to pull Yoon Bio away, his grandmother held on tight. "I've found the perfect girl, and I'm not letting her go." Meanwhile, Jeom Bio was trying on clothes at the department store when she received a call and rushed out, forgetting she was still half-dressed. Halfway through her drive, she realized something was amiss. If anyone discovered the chairman's daughter-in-law dressed inappropriately, she would be thrown out of the family. She decided to return to the store to rectify her mistake. But as she arrived, she saw a police car pulling up. The store had called the police faster than she expected. Panicked, she called her mother. Upon hearing the news, her mother rushed over, bringing her twin sister along. Meanwhile, Yoon Bio was on a date with Hanju, having just reconciled. Thinking something had happened to her mother, she rushed home. Upon arriving, her sister begged her to take the fall for her. Their mother joined in the pleading. Seeing Yoon Bio's reluctance, Jeom Bio dropped to her knees, her mother following suit. Seeing Yoon Bio's unwavering stance, they finally agreed to let her and Hanju get married. Hearing they would no longer interfere with their relationship, Yoon Bio agreed to help. Afterward, the two went to the police station to negotiate with the store. Luckily, the store manager agreed not to press charges. Later, Yoon Bio visited Hanju, and they set a date to meet each other's parents. However, on the appointed day, Hanju's grandmother spilled a bottle of body wash on the sauna floor. Not long after, Yoon Bio's mother entered and discovered her body wash was gone. At that moment, Hanju's mother looked over and realized, to her surprise, what had happened. It was a case of enemies meet on a narrow road. The last time they had run into each other at the mall and accidentally swapped items, and now they had mistakenly taken each other's body wash. Immediately, they began to argue and ultimately left in a huff. After returning home, Yoon Bio's mother told her about encountering a thick-skinned woman. Yoon Bio, feeling indignant on her mother's behalf, had no idea that this woman was her future mother-in-law. Next, Hanju's family waited at a restaurant, while Yoon Bio's family was on their way. Hanju quickly went out to greet them, opening the door for both families to exchange greetings. However, the two mothers, who had just argued a few days prior, met again. In contrast, the two fathers, upon meeting, immediately addressed each other as in-laws. The mothers, however, were a different story. Yoon Bile tried to pull her mother away. Hanju also tried to intervene, but his mother said, "If she wants to leave, let her. I don't want someone raised by such a spiteful mother as my daughter-in-law." Both sets of parents left in frustration, leaving the two young lovers to listen to calls from their fathers. Concerned for their children's happiness, the fathers devised a plan, intentionally arranging for the mothers to meet. They hoped the mothers would fight, giving the fathers an excuse to intervene. But the mothers only displayed their arrogance, neither willing to apologize. Seeing the situation escalate, the fathers stepped in. At this point, Yoon Bile and Hanju also arrived. Thus, the two sides met once again. To encourage reconciliation, Hanju's father intentionally spilled a glass of juice, and Yoon Bile's father followed suit. The mothers panicked and rushed to the restroom to clean their clothes. They both reached for the same bar of soap. Instead of continuing their argument, they suddenly became unusually polite. When they emerged, they had reconciled and agreed to their children's marriage. Soon, the wedding day arrived. Yoon Bile's father walked her down the aisle and gave her hand to Hanju. But just as they were walking toward the altar, a little boy accidentally ripped Yoon Bile's dress. On the first day after the wedding, as soon as Yoon Bile stepped into her husband's house, she jumped on her father-in-law. She had just returned from her parents' house, and her husband was outside retrieving her suitcase. Yoon Bile decided to explore the garden. Suddenly, a dog sitting on the ground barked at her twice. Startled, Yoon Bile ran around a table, the small dog playfully chasing after her. Hearing the commotion, her father-in-law rushed out to see what was happening. In her panic, Yoon Bile jumped onto the table and then lunged towards her father-in-law. He instinctively stretched out his arms, unsure where to place them, frozen in place. Other family members emerged to witness this bizarre scene. Hanju quickly picked up the dog, while his aunt laughed uncontrollably. Yoon Bile realized she had jumped on her father-in-law and quickly jumped down, landing on the floor. Hanju helped her up, explaining that she was afraid of dogs. Back in their room, as they were about to enjoy some private time, Hanju's grandmother's voice suddenly interrupted, causing them great embarrassment. The next morning, Yoon Bile woke up early to fetch the newspaper for her father-in-law. She then went to her grandmother-in-law's room to help her fold blankets. Meanwhile, her twin sister was still sound asleep, even having her husband answer her phone. Her mother-in-law told her to get up and cook, but she wanted to go back to her parents' house for pre-made food. Yoon Bile, on the other hand, was busy with housework. Her mother-in-law, however, didn't want her to overwork herself. When Yoon Bile asked to go to her parents' house to pick up some things, her mother-in-law readily agreed. Upon arriving at her parents' house, Yoon Bile discovered Jeom Bile was already there. As she changed her shoes, she overheard them discussing her in-laws and Jeom Bile's in-laws. Because their in-laws were long-standing rivals, they were discussing how to handle the situation. Their father hoped they could reconcile, while Jeom Bile wanted Yoon Bile to get a divorce. Hearing this, Yoon Bile stormed in to confront her sister. The two argued, moving from the living room to the bedroom, each defending their own in-laws. Unable to win the argument verbally, Jeom Bile resorted to physical violence. Yoon Bile, no pushover herself, retaliated, and the two ended up in a hair-pulling fight. However, their mother had always favored Jeom Bile, so when Jeom Bile couldn't gain the upper hand, she called for their mother. Their mother quickly arrived to intervene, but no matter how much she tried to separate them, the sisters refused to let go of each other's hair until their father arrived. Jeom Bile told her sister to get a divorce. Yoon Bile retorted, telling Jeom Bile to get a divorce herself. Fed up, their father told them to sever their relationship and never return to their parents' house again. Seeing her father's anger, Yoon Bile chased after him. Finding him sitting alone in the yard, she apologized. He expressed his hope that both his daughters would find happiness and not treat each other like enemies. But he also worried about Yoon Bile ghostwriting her father-in-law's autobiography. What would happen if her sisters-in-laws found out? Just then, Jeom Bile and their mother also came outside. Yoon Bile told her sister to apologize to their father, and Jeom Bile silently complied. Their father scolded Jeonbile, saying that as the older sister, she should be setting a good example and promoting love between them, not suggesting divorce. The sisters finally agreed to reconcile and to keep their in-laws' secrets. However, on the opening day of Yeonbile's father-in-law's cafe, Jeonbile's father-in-law happened to see it. Yeonbile was at the intersection across from the cafe. Seeing her, the chairman waved. At the same time, her father-in-law was also calling her over. Panicked, Yeonbile quickly hid. If these two families, with their long-standing feud, discovered the connection, it would be disastrous. She called Hanju, asking him to intercept his father. Meanwhile, Min-ho rushed to pick up the chairman. Yeonbile only breathed a sigh of relief after the chairman left. But just then, her mother and Jeonbile's mother-in-law arrived. Upon seeing Yeonbile's father-in-law's cafe, Yeonbile's mother quickly covered the car window with her arm. Jeonbile's mother-in-law thought something was wrong with her arm, but Yeonbile's mother claimed she was shielding her from the sun. After getting out of the car, Yeonbile's mother muttered, "Yeonbile's in-laws and you are enemies, and because I'm connected to both, I'm suffering." On the weekend, Yeonbile and Hanju brought fresh fish to her parents' house. While they were eating, the doorbell rang. Yeonbile opened the door to find Jeonbile's in-laws. Panicked, she yelled inside, warning Hanju to hide. Yeonbile quickly ushered him into the storage room while her mother stalled their guests in the living room. Hanju had no choice but to hide, head in his hands. Suddenly, Yeonbile opened the storage room door, telling him to stay put and be quiet. She then hurried back to the living room. Having never met Yeonbile's husband, Jeonbile's mother-in-law expressed her desire to meet him. Yeonbile could only say she had come alone. Jeonbile's father-in-law remarked, "Your husband is quite precious, hard to catch a glimpse of." Yeonbile excused herself to get some juice. Turning back, she realized her and Hanju's wedding photo was still on the table. She subtly alerted her mother, who, upon seeing the photo, feigned needing something from her room and discreetly removed the picture. Meanwhile, in the stuffy storage room, Hanju opened a window for air, accidentally knocking the window pane out and startling Jeonbile's in-laws. Fortunately, Yeonbile quickly covered, saying it was just a cat. Luckily, they didn't stay long, but their departure didn't bode well. The next day, they summoned Yeonbile's mother to their house to cook. Jeonbile returned home to find her mother acting as a servant. Her mother-in-law arrived, claiming she hadn't asked her to come. She had come of her own accord. Jeonbile pulled her mother away. Min-ho also urged her to return home with him. Watching her mother leave, Jeonbile finally felt a pang of sadness. At the dinner table, the family discussed how delicious the food was and suggested replacing their current housekeeper. Unable to contain herself any longer, Jeonbile flipped the table. Afterward, she ran to the bathroom, vomiting violently, muttering, "I'm sorry, Mom." Meanwhile, Yeonbile woke up in the middle of the night looking for a snack. She saw something and screamed. Hanju rushed over, and his parents came out to see what was going on. Yeonbile turned on the kitchen light, but with her eyes squeezed shut, she grabbed a broom. It turned out to be her mother-in-law, who has Alzheimer's, sitting on the floor eating kimchi. Realizing it was her mother-in-law, Yeonbile went over to comfort her. But the older woman kept muttering, "That wicked woman stole my food and stole our ancestral home." Yeonbile knew that the wicked woman referred to their family's three-generation rival. However, her in-laws were still unaware that their family's rival was also Jeonbile's in-laws. Seeing Yeonbile comforting her mother-in-law, everyone felt relieved. To keep her in-laws from finding out she was working at their rival's company, Yeonbile went to the CEO to submit her resignation. However, a lawyer then approached her. The lawyer's client claimed that the autobiography Yeonbile wrote had plagiarized their family history and wanted Yeonbile to testify. The client turned out to be Yeonbile's father-in-law. Upon learning this, she immediately wanted to leave. But before she could get out the door, she ran into her father-in-law. At that moment, Hanju arrived. Her father-in-law asked him if his daughter-in-law helped their rival write an autobiography and stole their family history. After getting his answer, he almost collapsed. Seeing this, Yeonbile rushed to support him, but he pushed her away. Ultimately, the truth couldn't be hidden any longer. After calming down, her father-in-law drank a glass of water and told Yoon Bile to keep it a secret from her mother-in-law, saying it was enough that the three of them knew. Then he left. Yoon Bile and Han-ju discussed the situation. They decided not to hide it from their families any longer and to reveal that her sisters-in-laws were their family rivals. Yoon Bile then went to talk to her sister. But Jeom Bile, who was planning to get pregnant, said, "Let's talk later," wanting to leave herself a way out. Yoon Bile, however, didn't want to deceive her in-laws. They disagreed and argued. This scene was witnessed by Yoon Bile's mother-in-law. She immediately rushed in. Although the sisters had been at odds since childhood, this was the first time their in-laws had seen them fight after they got married. Yoon Bile's mother-in-law asked why they were arguing. Yoon Bile stammered, not wanting to tell, but Jeom Bile deliberately said it was because of a disagreement about their parents' affairs. Yoon Bile's mother-in-law commented that it wasn't appropriate for them, as married women, to be arguing in a cafe like that, and told them to compose themselves. After she left, the sisters continued discussing the matter of their in-laws. Because their families were three-generation rivals, but neither side knew, Yoon Bile wanted to tell her in-laws, but Jeom Bile wanted to continue hiding the truth. In the end, they parted ways unhappily due to their disagreement. That day, their parents' store opened. They intentionally gave their in-laws the wrong time for the celebration. However, while Yoon Bile was out shopping, Jeom Bile's in-laws arrived early. She frantically called Yoon Bile, but she didn't answer. A while later, Yoon Bile's in-laws also arrived. Yoon Bile returned just in time. After greeting everyone, Yoon Bile saw Jeom Bile's in-laws. By then, her own in-laws had also entered. The three-generation rivals froze upon seeing each other. But her mother greeted them. "Welcome, in-laws." Upon hearing this, both sides were stunned. Then, the inevitable happened. A verbal battle ensued. The two sets of in-laws sat on opposite sides, while the parents stood in the middle, enduring their fury. Jeom Bile's in-laws wanted to call off the engagement. Her father apologized, but they still got up and left. Then, Yoon Bile's in-laws also left angrily. Min Ho, arriving at the door, was kicked by his father. He flew into a rage and disowned him. Han-ju arrived and also encountered his parents. The outcome was no better. After Min Ho returned home, the chairman beat him with a wooden stick and kicked him out. His mother also smashed a vase on the floor, wanting them out. Meanwhile, Han-ju knelt on the ground, begging his father. He couldn't break up with Yoon Bile. At this point, Jeom Bile had returned to her parents' home, and Yoon Bile also packed her bags and returned. However, upon meeting, the sisters blamed each other and started arguing. Their mother was exasperated that they were still fighting after everything that had happened. In her anger, their mother kicked them both out. With no other option, Yoon Bile and her husband planned to stay at a motel. But her sister and her husband wanted to go to a hotel. Even though they had been kicked out, the older couple still found their younger sister's family irritating. However, they hadn't brought any money. Yoon Bile and Han-ju silently watched their embarrassment, so Jeom Bile decided to borrow some money from her brother-in-law to get by. Han-ju took money out of his pocket, but Min Ho reached out his hand first. However, the amount wasn't enough for a hotel, only enough for a sauna, so that's where they all ended up. Min Ho, seeing the boiled eggs in Han-ju's hand, gulped. Han-ju offered to share his dinner, but Jeom Bile, putting on a brave face, said that she and her husband weren't hungry. So Han-ju and Yoon Bile ate the eggs together. Yoon Bile told Han-ju to go home after he finished eating. Jeom Bile and Min Ho, hungry, could only sit and read. Min Ho planned to go home to get some food. Han-ju went to his parents, hoping they would forgive Yoon Bile. But his mother said the sisters had to sever their relationship, or else she would make Han-ju divorce Yoon Bile. Meanwhile, Min Ho was kneeling before his parents, but the outcome was the same as at Han-ju's house. Han-ju returned to the sauna and told Yoon Bile about his mother's demand. Min Ho arrived at the sauna with a basket of boiled eggs. He also told Yoon Bile that his parents demanded the sisters break off their relationship. Jeom Bile agreed without hesitation. The next day, the sisters went to their parents' house and told them everything. They informed their mother of their decision to sever ties. Although this wasn't the outcome their mother wanted, She also hoped her daughters would be accepted by their in-laws. Yoon Bio then went to see her mother-in-law. Her mother-in-law told her not to tell her grandmother-in-law anything. She agreed to let Yoon Bio return home, but said she needed time to accept the situation. Things weren't so easy for Jeom Bio. Her mother-in-law locked her out, treating her like a stranger. With no other choice, she returned to her parents' home. Because of the sisters' situation, their mother drank a lot. She saw that even though Jeom Bio had cut ties with her sister, she still couldn't return home. Fueled by alcohol, she went to see her in-laws. When the two met, the mother told Jeom Bio to pack her bags. She didn't need in-laws like that. The newly opened cafe was doing so well that Jeom Bio's in-laws were secretly scouting it out. But Yoon Bio's grandmother saw them. Recognizing them as her family's rivals lurking outside, she started scolding them. They tried to run away, but the grandmother threw her husband's cane at the chairman. Seeing that it almost hit them, the chairman angrily approached her. He demanded an apology, but the grandmother glared back at him. At that moment, Yoon Bio came out. Seeing the chairman there, she knew something was wrong. The chairman greeted her, but her grandmother didn't understand why they knew each other. So the chairman revealed that Yoon Bio's twin sister was his daughter-in-law. The grandmother couldn't believe it. They quickly helped her back into the cafe. She asked them what was going on. After learning the truth, she fainted. They immediately called an ambulance. Hanju wanted to go with her, but his mother pushed him off the ambulance. Yoon Bio stood frozen, filled with self-blame. After the doctor examined her, the grandmother was fine. But when Yoon Bio's mother-in-law came to visit, she was gone. The grandmother had wandered out alone and ended up in the middle of a busy street. She watched the cars go by, lost and confused. She looked around helplessly and was spotted by Min Ho. He took her back to his place. In the car, the grandmother kept talking to Min Ho, but he ignored her. Thinking he was a bad person, she grabbed his neck. The car immediately lost control and crashed into a tree. Min Ho got out to check the damage, finding the front of the car dented. Hanju was searching everywhere for his grandmother. He arrived at Min Ho's house. At that moment, Min Ho drove up. Hanju asked if his grandmother had been there. Min Ho told him to look at his car first. Thinking his grandmother had been hit, Hanju grabbed Min Ho by the collar. But Min Ho led him to the back seat. Seeing that his grandmother was unharmed, Hanju calmed down. Min Ho took her back to his house. Learning about the car accident, Jeom Bio and her mother-in-law went to Yoon Bio's mother-in-law's house. They wanted to compensate for the repairs. But Yoon Bio's mother-in-law wasn't one to back down, so another verbal battle ensued. The two sisters were talking when the older sister, Jeom Bio, noticed her mother-in-law peeking. She grabbed her younger sister, Yoon Bio's, hair while Jeom Bio's mother-in-law continued to watch from the gate. Jeom Bio tightened her grip. Just then, their mother returned and asked her in-law what she was doing there. The mother-in-law said the sisters were fighting, so their mother rushed inside, only to find Yoon Bio on top of Jeom Bio. Their mother tried to intervene, but Jeom Bio bit Yoon Bio's hand. Yoon Bio retaliated by biting Jeom Bio's hand. Their mother finally separated them, scolding them, asking if they were animals, filming a wildlife documentary. Exhausted, their mother knelt on the ground. Earlier, Jeom Bio and her mother-in-law had gone to Yoon Bio's husband's house. Their grandmother had accidentally damaged Min Ho's Yoon Bio's husband's car, so they came demanding 30 million won for emotional distress and reputational damage. Unexpectedly, Yoon Bio's aunt, having just returned home, overheard them. She stormed out, yelling at Jeom Bio's mother-in-law, threw a basin of water on her, and chased them away. Jeom Bio, wanting to impress her mother-in-law, decided to definitively end her relationship with Yoon Bio. That's why they went to their mother's house to discuss the matter, which led to the fight. The next day, Yoon Bio was helping out at a cafe when Jeom Bio and her mother-in-law also showed up. The sisters ran into each other in the restroom. Jeom Bio tried to start a conversation, but Yoon Bio told her to stop pretending they knew each other because they had severed ties. Jeom Bio grabbed Yoon Bio's arm, but Jeom Bio's mother-in-law saw them. Just then, Yoon Bio's mother-in-law also entered. Both mothers-in-law started gossiping about the sisters' broken relationship, leaving the sisters at a loss. Meanwhile, their grandmother had recovered. She hit Hanju Jeombile's husband a few times and blamed him for marrying into her sworn enemy's family. She refused to live with them. Hanju's father told them to go back to his wife's parents' house and wait until his mother calmed down. At that moment, a man returned from abroad and went looking for Yeonbile. He greeted her in an American style, which was witnessed by Yeonbile's husband, Hanju. Yeonbile pushed the man away, and they began to chat. Hanju, standing behind them, burned with jealousy. He called out Yeonbile's name, and she noticed him approaching. Hanju carefully looked at the man and asked who he was. Yeonbile introduced him as a childhood friend. They exchanged pleasantries, but there was an underlying tension in their gazes. The man invited them for coffee, but Hanju flatly refused. Then, the man asked for Yeonbile's phone number, while Hanju watched him intently. Yeonbile returned his phone and politely said goodbye. Hanju quickly ushered Yeonbile away. The next day, while Yeonbile was working at the cafe, the same man returned, bringing flowers to congratulate them on their opening. Hanju thanked him, but the man wanted to talk to Yeonbile privately. Yeonbile said she was busy, so the man pulled her outside. Hanju pulled Yeonbile back, pushing the man's hand away and telling him to say whatever he had to say there. The man then confessed his feelings for Yeonbile. Hanju was dumbfounded by this blatant attempt to steal his wife. Yeonbile told the man, Chun Dong, to go outside and talk, but Hanju insisted Yeonbile stay inside. He then called Chun Dong. It seems like the name might be Chun Jang, based on later texts, to follow him outside. Hanju asked him what he wanted. He repeated his confession of love for Yeonbile. Hanju angrily retorted, confessing to a married woman? Chun Jang said that love needs no reason, even if someone is married. Hanju was speechless and grabbed him by the collar. At this point, Yeonbile ran out and quickly intervened. Chun Jang ignored Hanju, patted Yeonbile's head, and left. As Yeonbile prepared to go home, Hanju told her not to wander around, to go straight home, and to wash her hair. But as Yeonbile left, Chun Dong was waiting for her at the door and opened his car door, inviting her in. Yeonbile told him to apologize to Hanju, but Chun Jang claimed he was just joking. Annoyed, Yeonbile kicked his car tire, but he pushed her into the vehicle. This scene was witnessed by the cafe staff. After Chun Jang drove Yeonbile home, just before she got out, he suddenly cupped her face and remarked how much she resembled her younger self. Yeonbile brushed it off and left. Meanwhile, the cafe staff told Hanju that Yeonbile had left in Chun Jang's car. He frantically called her, but she didn't answer. At that moment, Yeonbile and her aunt were shopping at a supermarket. Suddenly, the security alarm went off. Staff rushed over and stopped them, asking them to wait. However, when other shoppers passed without triggering the alarm, the staff insisted on checking their bags. Feeling like they were being treated as thieves, they became angry. Yeonbile presented her receipt, which proved to be in order. However, her aunt couldn't find hers. The staff reached out to check her bag, and her aunt, seeing the staff member's intention to touch her, flew into a rage. Since the supermarket was owned by their sworn enemies, she loudly called out the chairman's name, which was overheard by Yeonbile and her mother-in-law. Hearing someone call her husband's name, Yeonbile's mother-in-law came to investigate. Given their existing feud, upon learning of the situation, Yeonbile's mother-in-law told the staff to thoroughly check their belongings. Yeonbile's aunt erupted, unleashing a torrent of insults at her enemies. The commotion attracted the store manager, who, upon seeing Yeonbile, claimed she had a prior record for theft. Yeonbile, witnessing this, hid. Yeonbile instantly realized this referred to the previous incident where she had taken the blame for her sister's shoplifting. Yeonbile's mother-in-law continued to press the matter. Yeonbile looked at Yeonbile, who shook her head, hoping Yeonbile would continue to cover for her. However, Yeonbile pointedly looked at Yeonbile, arousing the manager's suspicion. The chairman's wife asked what was happening, and the manager looked back and forth between Yeonbile and Yeonbile. Just then, the staff members said they only needed to confirm the aunt's receipt. The aunt dumped everything out of her bag, revealing the receipt underneath. She then demanded to sue them for defamation and emotional distress. As Yeonbile's mother-in-law was leaving, she deliberately sent Yeonbile away and returned to speak to the manager. The manager mentioned something odd. The person who shoplifted and the person who confessed at the police station didn't quite look the same. She said the shoplifter resembled Jeom-bile more, planting a seed of doubt. Meanwhile, Jeom-bile went to her mother's house, intending to tell her to control Yoon-bile. Just then, her mother-in-law called, saying she was at the gate. Her mother urged Jeom-bile to hide in her room and went to greet her in-law. When questioned, Jeom-bile's mother spun a blatant lie. Instead of admitting Jeom-bile's wrongdoing, she claimed Yoon-bile had a psychological condition that caused her to steal since childhood. The next day, Jeom-bile's mother-in-law went to the cafe to confront Yoon-bile. Yoon-bile ignored her, but her mother-in-law asked if she was sick. Confused, Yoon-bile only understood when her mother-in-law mentioned her mother's claim about her supposed kleptomania. Just then, Yoon-bile's own mother-in-law arrived. Jeom-bile's mother-in-law added fuel to the fire, further misleading Yoon-bile's mother-in-law about her. After returning home, feeling cornered, she told her mother-in-law about how her older sister, Jeom-bile, had blamed her for something. The mother-in-law was perplexed as to why she would protect Jeom-bile, so she went to see Yoon-bile's mother to get a clear answer. But before Yoon-bile's mother could respond, the doorbell rang. It was Jeom-bile's mother-in-law. Facing the questioning from both sets of in-laws, Yoon-bile's mother maintained that Yoon-bile was ill. Jeom-bile's mother-in-law retorted that her daughter-in-law had a habit of stealing, and was even lying to let her sister take the blame, which was ridiculous. Hearing this, Yoon-bile's mother became furious and stormed out. Back home, the mother-in-law questioned Yoon-bile. No matter how she explained, her mother-in-law refused to believe her. Therefore, Yoon-bile decided to go find her mother to get a straight answer. Yoon-bile went back to her childhood home to confront her mother, but her mother still wanted her to cover for her. Yoon-bile refused to take the blame and demanded that her mother explain everything. Her mother said she couldn't. In response, Yoon-bile unleashed all the pent-up frustration she had been holding in and pressured her mother to go find her mother-in-law. She made it clear, "If you don't, I'll go to Jeom-bile's in-law's house and reveal everything." Finally, the mother picked up the phone and recounted the entire situation, telling a lie to Yoon-bile's mother-in-law. Meanwhile, Jeom-bile was selecting lipsticks in a store. Then, looking around, she slipped a lipstick into her bag. But her actions were noticed by an employee, and the security camera also captured her. She quickly ran out. Once outside, she threw the lipstick into a trash can, muttering to herself, "What do I do?" Because she had suffered from kleptomania since she was young. It only resurfaced when she was terrified. The next day, she went outside the store and saw surveillance footage plastered on the glass. But she didn't dare go up to confirm if it was related to her theft. Jeom-bile returned home and immediately called her mother, asking her to come and confirm it. But her mother-in-law overheard the conversation. The next day, her mother went to the store. The image in the store was indeed of Jeom-bile, her daughter. She peered into the store, wondering how she should negotiate with the owner. Just as she was about to tear down the surveillance image, another hand snatched it away. It was Jeom-bile's mother-in-law. Jeom-bile's mother was terrified when she saw her in-law discover the truth, because just the day before, she had claimed that her youngest daughter, Yoon-bile, suffered from congenital kleptomania. So, she snatched the paper from her in-law's hand. Jeom-bile's mother tried to explain, but she was pushed away by the mother-in-law. She quickly called Jeom-bile, telling her to lock her bedroom door and not come out under any circumstances, and that she was on her way to her house. Jeom-bile immediately locked the door and prayed that her husband could save her. Just then, her mother-in-law returned home. Seeing that the door was locked and wouldn't open, she went to get the spare key. Jeom-bile, meanwhile, huddled under the covers in a corner, but her mother-in-law still broke in and found her. The mother-in-law went over and pulled the blanket away. Jeom-bile cowered on the floor, facing the questioning of her in-laws. She was waiting for her husband to come home. Soon, Min-ho arrived. Jeom-bile immediately hid behind him. Her mother-in-law told her to pack her things and leave immediately. Jeom-bile's mother, however, wanted to shift the blame to Yoon-bile, but the mother-in-law wouldn't believe her anymore. So, she went to Jeom-bile's closet and started pulling all the clothes out. Seeing this, Min-ho asked what was going on. Jeom-bile said that she had bought those clothes herself. The mother standing nearby kept explaining that Jeom-bile was being framed, and that her sister, Yoon Bile, had congenital kleptomania. Just then, Yoon Bile arrived at their door. Jeom Bile's mother was stunned to see Yoon Bile there. It turned out that Jeom Bile's mother-in-law had called her, wanting her to confirm whether it was true or not. Yoon Bile drank some water first. The mother still wanted her to take the blame, but Yoon Bile ignored her and directly told the truth. After speaking, she got up and left. Jeom Bile fainted upon hearing this. The mother-in-law immediately splashed a glass of water on her. The father-in-law told them to go back to their room and said that he would prepare the divorce papers for them. Jeom Bile's mother immediately knelt on the ground, begging, but the in-laws were determined not to let it go. The next day, Jeom Bile's mother-in-law presented her with divorce papers. Jeom Bile was shocked reading through them, but her mother-in-law insisted she agree, saying she couldn't possibly accept a daughter-in-law who was a thief. However, Jeom Bile refused, stating that it was a matter between her and her husband. She also pointed out that her illness had only resurfaced after she got married. Upon hearing that, her mother-in-law angrily stood up, intending to strike her, but Jeom Bile grabbed her wrist, warning her that if she ever laid a hand on her again, she wouldn't let it slide. Furious, Jeom Bile left and immediately called her husband. Min Ho rushed home and promptly tore up the divorce papers. However, Jeom Bile didn't want to live with her mother-in-law anymore. She wanted Min Ho to move out and live separately, but Min Ho told her to be patient, since it would be hard for everyone to accept her being kicked out by her husband's family. She continued to stay at her parents' house. The following day, the luggage she had left at her in-laws' house was delivered to her, even including the jewelry she had worn for her wedding. Finally, Jeom Bile couldn't take it anymore and proactively sought out her mother-in-law. She decided to divorce Min Ho, but demanded compensation in the form of their old house to cover her emotional distress. Her mother-in-law, however, thought she was crazy. Jeom Bile then pulled out a document outlining all the ways her mother-in-law had pressured her throughout her marriage. After reading it, her mother-in-law tore it up. But Jeom Bile produced another sheet, saying there were many more details documented. The mother-in-law became so enraged she tried to hit her, but Jeom Bile blocked her. In the ensuing struggle, the mother-in-law shoved Jeom Bile to the ground, which Min Ho happened to witness. A heated argument ensued between mother and son. Min Ho declared that he was moving out as well. He then pulled Jeom Bile out of the house. Seeing this, his mother fainted. Jeom Bile returned to her parents' house and told them that she and Min Ho would be staying there from now on. Then, she went to Yoon Bile's room, intending to convert it into a study for Min Ho. When Yoon Bile received the news and rushed home, she found all her belongings packed into boxes. The house where she had grown up now had no place for her. But her mother said that since the children didn't visit, they couldn't just leave the room empty. At that moment, Jeom Bile emerged from the room, announcing that she and her husband would be living there from now on. Yoon Bile, without a word, quietly took her belongings and left. Yoon Bile returned home and sat alone in the yard, remembering the words her mother had said to her. She gazed at the moon in the sky and silently cried, wondering why her mother hated her and why she was even born. Min Ho pushed open the bathroom door and discovered his mother-in-law washing her hair. Jeom Bile, hearing the noise, went to see what was happening. Min Ho explained that his mother-in-law was washing her hair. Jeom Bile complained that having only one bathroom was inconvenient, but Min Ho was in a hurry. Just then, her father arrived home and asked Min Ho to help out at the store, to which he agreed. Finally, his mother-in-law came out of the bathroom, and he hurriedly rushed inside. After they arrived at the store and were preparing to have some tea, their youngest son-in-law, Han-ju, showed up. The two sons-in-law, who were already rivals, glared at each other. When the father-in-law needed to leave to deliver some food, Han-ju offered to go instead, so Min Ho quickly tried to compete. As a result, the two of them went outside together. Min Ho grabbed the motorcycle first and drove off. But on the way, he encountered a couple arguing. He could tell that this wasn't just a normal argument, so he approached them to ask what was going on. The woman wanted Min Ho to save her, but the man tried to attack her. Min Ho grabbed the man's arm, punched him a few times, and let him go. Then, Min Ho told the woman to call the police. However, the man secretly picked up a brick, and just as he was about to hit Min Ho, Han-ju appeared and stopped him. They arrived at the police station. But at that moment, the girl claimed they were just a normal couple having an argument. Min-ho knew the girl was being threatened by that man, but now he was powerless, so the two of them were detained. However, Han-ju was merely a witness, and he was quickly released. He sought out the victim and urged her to tell the truth. The girl was afraid her boyfriend would retaliate, but Han-ju continued to persuade her. Finally, she decided to reconsider. The next day, Han-ju visited Min-ho. He told Min-ho to reconcile with the other party, but Min-ho had no intention of doing so and even told Han-ju to leave. As Han-ju was about to leave, Min-ho's father arrived. He slapped Han-ju hard across the face, which Han-ju ignored. When the father tried to strike again, Min-ho yelled at him to stop, then told Han-ju to leave quickly. Han-ju left without a word. Eventually, the girl went to the police station to testify. As a result, Min-ho was released. He stood outside Han-ju's restaurant. He wanted to apologize to his father, but he didn't have the courage to go inside. Just as he was about to leave, he ran into Yoon Bio. So, he went inside and sat across from Han-ju. He wanted to thank Han-ju, but he didn't know how to say it. Han-ju, seeing that he wasn't going to speak, told him to leave. Finally, he blurted out an apology. "I'm sorry, Dad." But Han-ju didn't accept his apology. He told Min-ho to put himself in his shoes and see if he would accept such an apology. Although Han-ju didn't accept his apology, there were signs of reconciliation among the 3 generations of enemies. To appease the daughter she had favored for years, the mother made her favorite braised pork ribs. But she accidentally strained her back. So, the older sister blamed Yoon Bio, saying that it was because of her that their mother was injured. Yoon Bio felt very uncomfortable after hearing this. From a young age, her mother had always favored her older sister, Jeom Bio, and she had never received her mother's attention. In a fit of anger, the mother threw all the food she had prepared on the ground and then kicked Yoon Bio out of the house. Yoon Bio looked at her mother's retreating figure and knew she shouldn't return home. The mother lay in bed and remembered the words Yoon Bio had said to her, and she could only sigh silently. At that moment, Jeom Bio called her out to eat. So, the mother asked why she had criticized Yoon Bio. But Jeom Bio said that it was Yoon Bio's fault in the first place. The mother struggled to sit up, realizing that she had been too biased towards Jeom Bio, who had been spoiled from a young age, breaking several dishes just from washing them. When she took her mother out for a walk, she just walked ahead on her own, completely ignoring her mother's feelings, and then played on her phone, accidentally spraining her ankle. The mother returned home and wanted to use the bathroom, but suddenly her back hurt severely. She loudly called out Jeom Bio's name, but Jeom Bio came in, not knowing why her mother had called her. So, her mother told her to clean the bathroom after she took a shower. Jeom Bio said she was going to clean it anyway, but her mother going in first left her speechless. Jeom Bio was sleeping on the sofa. The mother brought the washed clothes over and told her to hang them up. But she was lying down and didn't want to move, and she had scattered trash everywhere. So, the mother slowly sat down and cleaned up. Jeom Bio told her mother to hire a housekeeper. But the mother said she didn't know how to live. No wonder she was kicked out of her mother-in-law's house. Hearing this, Jeom Bio immediately stopped working, saying that she had become like this because her mother had raised her that way. So, the mother raised her hand to hit her, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. Jeom Bio went to find her younger sister. She wanted Yoon Bio to take care of their mother, but Yoon Bio wasn't planning on staying home. Her mother pushed Jeom Bio into the bathroom, accidentally splashing water on the person next to her. So, she apologized, but the woman cursed at her. Jeom Bio responded in kind. So, the woman intentionally splashed water on her. As a result, the two started arguing. The woman pushed Jeom Bio, accidentally bumping into her stomach, and Jeom Bio crouched down in pain. Yoon Bio came in and saw her, asking what was wrong. Jeom Bio just said she had a stomachache. So, Yoon Bio went to check and discovered that Jeom Bio was bleeding down her leg. At that moment, Jeom Bio also realized something was wrong. Yoon Bio quickly took her to the hospital. But they couldn't save baby Yoon Bio. Seeing her sister in such pain, she could only offer words of comfort. But Jeom Bio lashed out at Yoon Bio, blaming her for the miscarriage. She accused Yoon Bio of causing it by insisting on bringing her home to care for their mother. which led to her going to the restroom and getting into an argument with someone. Yoon Bio, overcome with self-reproach, quietly left the hospital room and dealt with her sadness alone until her brother-in-law arrived. Then, Yoon Bio returned to the shop to find her father. He told her not to tell their mother about the miscarriage and asked Yoon Bio to go to their mother's house to help out. So, Yoon Bio went to her mother's house. She thoroughly cleaned the bathroom and helped her mother, who had trouble walking, inside. She even told her mother to call her after using the restroom. Then she cooked a meal and brought it to her room, but her mother told her to go home and refused her kindness. Yoon Bio was confused. Jeom Bio told her to come see their mother, but now she was being sent away. Frustrated, Yoon Bio left. But before leaving, she insisted that her mother finish the meal. Finally, her mother burst into silent tears. The next day, Jeom Bio was discharged from the hospital and returned home. Only then did their mother learn about the miscarriage. Yoon Bio had already arrived at her mother's house early to make a nutritious meal for them. Jeom Bio's mother-in-law, having heard the news, also arrived. As soon as she entered, she blamed Jeom Bio for the situation, saying it was because she was taking care of her own mother. Then, she turned to their mother, scolding her for failing to take care of her daughter, which led to the miscarriage. Yoon Bio emerged from the kitchen, indignant on behalf of her sister. Their mother surprisingly sided with Yoon Bio for once. However, Jeom Bio defended her mother-in-law and then blamed Yoon Bio for speaking up. This time, however, their mother defended Yoon Bio, causing Jeom Bio to angrily storm off to her room. The older sister, unaware of her pregnancy, suffered an unexpected miscarriage. The kind younger sister cooked porridge for her, but the older sister refused to accept it and even kicked Yoon Bio out of the house. After leaving, Yoon Bio downed an entire can of soda and crushed it in her hand. Jeom Bio ate the porridge her sister made with a look of distaste, but their mother found it delicious. Jeom Bio, however, complained that her sister had used too much salt. Just then, Yoon Bio returned home. Seeing her sister's disgusted expression, she told her not to eat it and dumped out all the seaweed from the bowl. Their mother, who had always favored the older sister, finally spoke up for Yoon Bio. Seeing this, the older sister assumed they were both ganging up on her, so she went back to her room to pack her bags. Meanwhile, Yoon Bio was cleaning up the kitchen. Their mother explained that she had always favored Jeom Bio because she was weaker as a child, so she had treated them differently. Yoon Bio, having endured so much resentment, didn't blame her. At that moment, Jeom Bio quietly left with her luggage, aimlessly wandering down the street, unaware that she was heading towards her mother-in-law's house. As Jeom Bio turned to leave, she ran into her mother-in-law's housekeeper, who pulled her inside. Once inside, she found her mother-in-law drinking alone, so they toasted each other. Jeom Bio used the opportunity to get closer to her, but after a few drinks, she passed out and ended up in bed together. The chairman walked in, saw them, and slapped his wife on the bottom, startling her awake. She wondered why Jeom Bio was there. Jeom Bio returned to her mother's house and spoke highly of her mother-in-law. At that moment, Yoon Bio and her husband arrived. Their mother wanted to help out at the shop, while Yoon Bio prepared tea in the kitchen. Jeom Bio remembered her mother's words to her and wanted to apologize to Yoon Bio, but she couldn't bring herself to say it. Suddenly, the house went dark. The two husbands arrived with a birthday cake. Then, Min-ho apologized to Yoon Bio, and she asked if he was speaking on behalf of her sister. Jeom Bio awkwardly apologized to Yoon Bio as well. The next day, Jeom Bio's mother-in-law came to see her and told them to come live at their house, but she wasn't allowed to lie anymore. The mother-in-law and daughter-in-law's grudges were finally resolved. Meanwhile, on the other side, a third-generation couple from two feuding families were secretly dating. Because the boy her daughter loved was a descendant of their family's longtime enemies, the chairman fainted when he found out about their relationship. Hanju's father also fainted and fell to the ground when he learned his daughter was in love with a member of the rival family. Both families rushed their fathers to the hospital. The two feuding fathers met in the hospital, each sitting on opposite sides of the room, negotiating. But they were united on one point: they would absolutely not allow their children to be together. If they violated their agreement, both families would be ruined. As they were about to return to their rooms, they saw two bodies being wheeled out. Because their parents had opposed their marriage, they had committed suicide together. That day was a month after they had been discovered in a house in the countryside. Therefore, while his daughter was sleeping, the chairman locked Jai-ho in the basement. However, Minho and Jeom-byeol discovered the secret cellar underground, so they decided to rescue their younger sister. By the time they got Jai-ho out, several days had already passed. But at this time, Dong-ju, who was waiting for her outside, was in a car accident. After he was found, he was taken to the hospital for emergency treatment, but due to a concussion, he lost consciousness. Han-ju went to the chairman's office. He angrily grabbed the chairman by the collar, believing that he didn't want his younger brother and the chairman's daughter to be together, so he intentionally had Dong-ju injured. But the chairman said that he only ordered people to follow Dong-ju, not to harm him. Han-ju didn't believe him and issued a warning before leaving. A little later, Jai-ho also came to find the chairman. She angrily questioned her father, saying that if he could imprison his own daughter, what wouldn't he do to the son of his enemy? She said that if anything happened to Dong-ju, she would make him regret it. Afterward, Jai-ho quietly went to visit Dong-ju. The moment she held Dong-ju's hand, he slowly opened his eyes, but didn't show any reaction. After the doctor examined him, he discovered that he had only temporarily opened his eyes, but there was now hope of him regaining consciousness. Therefore, Jai-ho went to find the chairman again. She wanted her father to find Dong-ju the best hospital. If he could cure Dong-ju, she would listen to the chairman in everything. So, her father forced her to study abroad and break up with Dong-ju. Jai-ho had no other choice but to agree. After a period of treatment, Dong-ju finally regained consciousness. But Jai-ho was now preparing to study abroad. Just at that moment, a hand held her back. It was Dong-ju. He wished her a safe journey. Then Jai-ho's father urged his daughter to leave quickly. Han-ju was making bibimbap for his wife, but his mother asked if she didn't have hands. Because of Han-ju's explanation, his mother learned that Yoon-byeol was pregnant. Because his younger brother had an accident, the couple hadn't announced this to the family. Now that his younger brother had regained consciousness, they didn't need to hide it anymore. The mother-in-law also apologized to Yoon-byeol for her behavior recently because she had been feeling suffocated. And her older sister, Jeom-byeol, on the other side, was also showing signs of pregnancy. So, the mother-in-law was overjoyed and told her to get tested. The next day, the two sisters returned to their parents' house to share the good news. Yoon-byeol recounted the prenatal dream that the grandmother had, but then they started to worry. Because their two mothers-in-law were enemies, their children would become the fourth-generation heirs of the feud. While they were saddened by this, the youngest aunt, who had been taken to the airport by Jeom-byeol's in-laws, secretly returned home. And Yoon-byeol's youngest uncle was also depressed because he had been forced to break up with his girlfriend. Just as he was about to go out and relieve his feelings, he happened to meet Jai-ho, who was also looking at him. Afterward, they went to the beach where they had dated before and vowed not to leave each other this time. So, the two unilaterally decided on marriage. Even if both families were enemies, they would not leave each other. But when they returned home, Jai-ho's father chased them away like evil spirits. And at this time, Jai-ho's mother discovered many kinds of medicine in her daughter's luggage. She felt heartbroken for her daughter and realized that this was the result of them separating the lovers. Therefore, she found the chairman and scolded him harshly. But no matter how worried she was about her daughter, the chairman wouldn't agree to Jai-ho marrying the son of the enemy. So, when they went to bed, she kicked the chairman out of bed. Then she grabbed a stick and chased him outside. Jeom-byeol and her husband came out to see what was going on, but the mother told them not to open the door for their father under any circumstances. And at Dong-ju's house on the other side, the grandmother also made an important decision. She decided to give up the fight for the ancestral land with the enemy family and agreed to let her grandson marry the daughter of the enemy family. As long as the living are happy, that is the happiness of the whole family. At this time, both families agreed to the marriage of the two young people, only the chairman was still struggling to oppose it. And at this time, Yoon-byeol was stabbed and fell while saving her sister. Not having time to worry about the child in her womb, the older sister rushed to check the situation, but Yoon-byeol was lying motionless. Jeom-byeol was so scared that she didn't know what to do. Before long, Yoon-byeol slowly regained consciousness. The two women went to the hospital for a checkup, but Jeonbyeol suddenly burst into tears. Seeing this, Yoonbyeol said, "What are you crying about?" A little later, Hanju and Minho arrived as well, but the two sisters were already embracing and weeping. Minho went over to comfort Jeonbyeol. Hanju also came to ask about Yoonbyeol's condition. After learning that his baby was safe, he breathed a sigh of relief. Yoonbyeol hadn't considered her own safety because she was protecting her sister's baby. Because Jeonbyeol had suffered a miscarriage before, they couldn't let her lose another child. Jeonbyeol scolded Yoonbyeol for acting so recklessly. The two embraced and cried again. Finally, they had truly become sisters who cared for each other. Then, the next day, in order to prevent their soon-to-be-born children from becoming enemies, they went to the chairman's office, armed with protest signs they had prepared, to convince him to agree to a reconciliation between the two feuding families. Even inside the house, they placed protest signs everywhere, and everyone wore matching yellow outfits. Because everyone in the house agreed to the reconciliation, only the chairman remained opposed. Protest slogans were written on the back of everyone's shirts. Even while eating, they held candles to express their dissatisfaction. Even the housekeeper wore a yellow shirt with words on the back like, "Is this really a family?" The chairman was so angry that he refused to eat his meals. He went to his ancestors' graves to lament his plight, but ended up falling asleep there. A young man happened to find him. He checked for a pulse and found him still alive, then promptly noticed the chairman's watch. When the chairman woke up and went to check the time, he discovered his watch was gone. His phone and wallet were also missing, and they hadn't even left him his car. The walk back home was dozens of kilometers. He tried to hitchhike, but no one would give him a ride. He finally found a telephone booth, but saw a sign on the ground that said, "Out of order." Finally, he encountered a student, but the girl ran away in fright when she saw him. Then, Dongju, who was passing by, saw him. The chairman saw a car stop and eagerly went to investigate, only to discover it was his hated future son-in-law. Dongju said, "Get in the car and we can talk." When the chairman returned home, he changed his mind. Not only did he agree to his daughter's wedding, but he also returned the ancestral family land to Hanju's father, because the ancestral land originally belonged to their family. If the two families were about to become in-laws, they should resolve the root cause of the feud. Soon, months passed. Today was the day of the two families' weddings. The grooms and brides were performing the wedding ceremony, but Yoonbyeol suddenly felt abdominal pain, and immediately afterward, Jeonbyeol did too. The whole wedding ceremony descended into chaos. Moments later, in two separate ambulances, Hanju anxiously comforted Yoonbyeol, telling her to breathe deeply. On Minho's side, he taught Jeonbyeol the same thing, but she was in so much pain that she squeezed his neck, while Yoonbyeol grabbed Hanju's hair tightly. The two sisters' husbands stood outside the delivery rooms, anxiously shaking. Before long, a loud cry of a newborn baby rang out. Yoonbyeol had given birth to a healthy baby girl. Jeonbyeol, who had always been in poor health, was still in labor. Time passed, from daytime to evening. Everyone was anxiously waiting, when finally, a baby's cry rang out. Jeonbyeol also gave birth to a healthy baby girl, but she developed postpartum depression. Then, the mother told them her experience of raising twins to comfort the two sisters. After Yoonbyeol and her husband returned home, the grandmother joyfully hugged the baby. Jeonbyeol's in-laws were also incredibly happy. Over on that side, the grandmother made a final decision. She donated the ancestral land that had been reclaimed, because the ancestral land had caused 3 generations of feuding, and she didn't want such disputes to arise again in the future. The two sisters lived together for a year, and Jeonbyeol's postpartum depression was cured. The two twin sisters no longer acted like they would argue as soon as they saw each other. In a blink of an eye, the baby's first birthdays arrived, and the whole family gathered happily together.